It began as a normal evening on a remote South Australian property, and within hours a family, a town, and a nation were left searching for answers. Before we dive in, please hit the subscribe button for more updates. On September 27th, 4-year-old Gus Lamont was last seen near his grandparents' homestead on a secluded station north of Adelaide. What followed was a massive, highly resourced search that has so far produced no confirmed trace of the boy, and a swirl of questions about what investigators have found, what they haven't said, and how the public should understand the slow, often cautious work of an active inquiry. When the alarm was raised, neighbors and family members were the first to look. Their initial efforts quickly grew into a coordinated operation involving local police, specialist search teams, and regional volunteers. Helicopters crisscrossed the skies, drones scanned the terrain, and specialist tracking units combed the scrubland and fence lines. Because of the vastness and roughness of the countryside, authorities expanded their search radius over time, initially a couple of kilometers, later widening to several, as teams attempted to leave no stone unturned. The arrival of additional personnel and equipment signaled both the seriousness with which officials treated the disappearance and the practical challenges of searching an open, sparsely featured environment where signs can vanish fast and visibility can be limited by scrub, gullies, and the sweep of the horizon. Yet despite days of sustained effort, the basic, heart-wrenching fact remains: no confirmed sign of Gus has emerged. Searchers reported potential leads during the early days: thermal anomalies that suggested movement, faint impressions in soil that looked like footprints, glimpses of disturbed vegetation, and each possibility prompted immediate follow-up. But on closer forensic examination, those tentative traces did not tie directly to the boy. Items found in the wider area were identified as belonging to other people or simply environmental debris. This absence of verified physical evidence has made the case particularly baffling and unsettling. When a young child disappears in open country, common sense and experience suggest there should be some trace, an item of clothing, a footprint, a dropped toy, but those markers have not materialized in a way investigators can verify. As the search stretched on, rumors began to spread on social media and in community groups, some claiming that a significant object had been recovered near the original search zone, others advancing more alarming and unverified theories. Official spokespeople have answered cautiously, often saying only that searches continue and that nothing has been confirmed to date. That restraint is understandable. Investigators must be careful not to disclose details that could compromise evidence or the broader inquiry. Still, the resulting silence or partial statements has widened a gap that online speculation has rushed to fill. In a climate where every unverified post can gain traction, distinguishing careful reporting from hearsay has become more difficult, and that confusion has increased the family's distress. Complicating the public conversation are the personal dynamics within the family and the community. The Lamonts are known locally as people who keep to themselves. They released a photo of Gus only after the search was already underway, a choice that fueled questions and commentary about timing and decision-making. Small inconsistencies in early public accounts, who was in which part of the station at particular times, why family members initially conducted their own searches before calling police, have been magnified online into suspicion. That scrutiny is predictable in a disappearance that touches a whole region, but it is also painful. Private grief becomes public narrative, and every delay or misremembered detail risks misinterpretation. It is essential to remember that families in these moments are operating under extreme strain and that preliminary timelines can shift as names, locations, and recollections are clarified. Volunteers who spent long hours on the ground have added a striking, if puzzling, dimension to the story. Experienced searchers described combing broad areas for extended periods and finding little or nothing that would indicate a child had moved through the scrub near the homestead. Those volunteers, many with years in emergency services or in rural search operations, say the landscape can be deceptively barren at night, with tracks easily obscured and small disturbances quickly lost. Their eyewitness accounts do not offer definitive conclusions, but they raise important operational questions. Were the first searches focused in the right places, and did the initial hours miss something crucial? Investigators are bound to review those possibilities carefully. When ground searches yield minimal physical evidence, detectives typically shift to other methods to reconstruct movements and timelines. And that is exactly what has happened. The effort has moved from an urgent search and rescue operation into a broader criminal inquiry framework. When physical searches do not produce clear results, investigators expand their approach, interviewing witnesses in depth, checking phone and vehicle records, scrutinizing movements of people and devices, and building forensic timelines. This does not necessarily imply wrongdoing by any particular individual. Rather, it reflects the logical next step in any missing person case where traditional search techniques have not produced answers. For families, that transition can feel jarring. The tone of the response changes from immediate rescue to meticulous reconstruction, and with that change comes a different tempo and a different set of public communications. It is the communication vacuum, real or perceived, that has arguably done the most damage to public confidence. Authorities frequently explain that certain operational details cannot be released for legal or investigative reasons. Yet when those explanations are brief or infrequent, the vacuum is quickly filled with speculation. In communities where trust in institutions is fragile, that can breed anger, conspiracy theories, and the erosion of cooperative goodwill that is so vital in an active investigation. Clear, regular updates that explain what can and cannot be said, paired with assurances about the direction and seriousness of the inquiry, can help reduce harmful rumors. Until such transparency is more visible, many members of the community will continue to press for answers and to question what they are not being told. The practical consequences of this situation are stark. Misinformation on social platforms has done more than cause confusion. It has consumed precious time, generated unfounded accusations, and spread harmful narratives that have compounded the trauma faced by the family and the broader community. In the hours and days after a disappearance, hope and fear run in parallel, and social media can amplify both. Well-meaning people, desperate to help, have circulated photographs, local anecdotes, and speculative posts that later turned out to be unrelated or incorrectly dated. Each mistaken claim requires investigators and volunteers to pause, check, and sometimes reallocate scarce resources, and every retracted rumor brings fresh hurt to those closest to the crisis. The result is a toxic feedback loop in which anxiety fuels speculation, speculation feeds the algorithms, and the family's grief becomes a public spectacle. At the same time, the same networks that spread misinformation have also delivered genuine, actionable tips. Members of the public have provided sightings and time-stamped information that contributed to legitimate follow-ups and that investigators could log and verify. Those productive contributions highlight why community involvement is so valuable. Local knowledge, observations, and a quick response from someone with relevant information can make a real practical difference. Yet the vital distinction is channeling those leads through official routes rather than scattering them in public forums. When evidence is handled properly, logged, time-stamped, and handed to investigators, its value is preserved and it can be integrated into a methodical inquiry. When it is posted for mass consumption first, its evidentiary value is diminished and it can mislead volunteers and the public. So, where does that leave us now? Practically, it leaves a family still living with unbearable uncertainty. Their lives have been paused by a sudden, traumatic gap in narrative. Normal routines are interrupted, and everyday decisions are reframed by a search that dominates thoughts and actions. Loved ones oscillate between hope and despair while facing intrusive scrutiny from strangers on social media. For volunteers and neighbors, there is exhaustion and frustration. Some feel their hours of searching have been devalued by false leads that keep resurfacing online. Others report a sense of helplessness in the face of endless speculation. The community tries to be helpful, but fatigue sets in, and the emotional labor of supporting the family and sustaining search efforts wears down even the most resilient helpers. Operationally, task force investigators are meticulously piecing together a picture from interviews, digital and forensic work, and whatever physical clues can be located. When initial ground searches yield few definitive traces, detectives shift to reconstruction, establishing precise timelines, interviewing all potential witnesses in exhaustive detail, cross-referencing phone and vehicle records, and seeking CCTV or satellite evidence where available. This methodical work is painstaking. It takes time, it is not always visible to the public, and it can feel slow. But in many cases, it is the only way to turn fragments of memory and small pieces of data into a coherent sequence of events that withstands legal and forensic scrutiny. That shift from immediate rescue to long-form investigative work is standard practice when physical searches do not produce clear answers, but it can be difficult for families and communities to accept because it changes the tempo and the tone of official communication. The environment itself complicates those efforts. The outback is vast, open, and dynamic. Wind, temperature, and wildlife dramatically alter the landscape and erase traces faster than in urban or wooded settings. Footprints that might persist in other conditions vanish within hours. Small pieces of clothing or other items can be carried by animals or swept away by weather. That reality forces search teams to act quickly and relentlessly within an inherently tight time frame, but even the most well-timed searches can miss important clues. Search experts must contend with an unforgiving environment where the margin for error is narrow and where the absence of visible signs does not necessarily indicate absence of something having occurred. This technical complexity underlines why investigators emphasize methodical re-examination of leads rather than public pronouncements based on early, incomplete information. That absence of immediate answers also highlights a deeper truth about public trust. Transparency and sensitive communication are essential to prevent the erosion of confidence in institutions. Authorities face difficult trade-offs. They must protect the integrity of operations, avoid disclosing details that could compromise legal processes, and at the same time remain open enough to keep the public informed and reassured. When that balance tilts too far towards silence, a vacuum appears and speculation rushes in to fill it. Clear, regular updates that explain both what can be said and why certain facts cannot be released help reduce harmful guessing. Conversely, intermittent or overly cautious statements, even if well-intentioned, can be misinterpreted as evasiveness. For an anxious public, the difference between perceived secrecy and necessary discretion is often invisible, and bridging that perception gap is a delicate but essential part of effective crisis management. There are also real, practical harms that false narratives can cause. Individuals named or hinted at in unverified posts can suffer reputational damage that is difficult to repair even if they are later cleared. In small communities, suspicion fueled by rumor can fracture relationships and erode the mutual trust that is needed for collaborative searches and community resilience. Resources can be squandered chasing misleading information. Volunteers can become demoralized when repeated false leads divert them from promising areas, and the family's grief can be compounded by intrusive suggestions and public accusations. These consequences are not theoretical. They play out in personal conversations, in online communities, and in the strained interactions between neighbors who once relied on each other without question. Yet despite the challenge of misinformation, the determination to find answers persists. Volunteers continue to search where they can, driven by compassion and hope. Detectives continue to re-examine timelines and to follow up on every credible lead, and forensic scientists retest evidence as new techniques and technologies become available. Long investigations sometimes produce breakthroughs only after months or years, when someone revisits material with fresh eyes or when new technological tools reveal previously hidden traces. That possibility, however slim, keeps professional investigators and volunteers motivated because the discovery of even a small, corroborating detail can shift the trajectory of a case. Finally, the human dimension must remain central. Families need compassionate communication, privacy where appropriate, and clear pathways to contribute information. Communities need guidance on how to assist constructively, and officials need to demonstrate both competence and care. The public also has a role to refrain from amplifying unverified claims, to pass along only time-stamped and evidence-based information through official channels, and to support affected families without inflaming an already painful situation. Responsible public behavior sustains investigative credibility and helps ensure that resources remain focused on finding answers rather than chasing shadows. This remains an open, unresolved, and deeply human story. It is a reminder of the fragility of certainty in remote places, of the strain placed on families under the glare of public attention, and of the obligations that investigators and journalists alike carry to be accurate and humane. The family waits for answers. Volunteers keep searching where they can, and detectives continue to follow every line of inquiry that might reveal what happened. We will report verified developments as they are released. If you found this report useful, please subscribe for updates and share when appropriate.